with ever since 1980. As you know, Term 91 is a standard provision that was put into more junior water right permittees and licensees on the Sacramento River watershed. It was put in 1980, basically saying that when the projects are releasing stored water to meet in-basin benefits and water quality standards, that the people with this term in it have to cease their diversion under that permit or license. It's fairly routinely invoked. I think since 1980, there's only been about 5 years where it has not been invoked. The length of time and how early it comes in is dependent on the type of year we've had. So obviously, this year being a drier year, the curtailment notices under Term 91 were sent out last week, and actually the curtailment period begins today. And there are about 93 people, I believe, that were subject to to this permit based on them actually having a water right that's in effect right now. It'll be handled much like other curtailments. They have to file a certification about either they've ceased their diversion or found an alternative supply, and we will go out and check on how they're doing and complying. So again, it's probably the first of the curtailment. It's a more traditional one. I don't even consider it particularly a drought-related curtailment, although obviously it was invoked earlier this year because of the drought. Okay, the next topic I want to talk a little bit about is compliance issues. On the reporting requirements, you can see that we've done a very good job getting the statements and reports in. There's just a handful of people that have not filed, and we're dealing with those through the appropriate process. The thing I want to focus on compliance is the water right decision D1641, which is the water right permit for the major water projects and their transfer of water from north to the south. And there are many conditions in that permit to protect beneficial uses in the delta. One of those is San Joaquin river flows, including pulse flows at Vernalis, and that's been kind of a vexing issue ever since the Vernalis adaptive management plan ceased, and the responsibility to meet the actual standard itself was placed on the Bureau of Reclamation. Mr. Howard did as part of the temporary urgency change order, approve a petition by Reclamation to modify the pulse flow somewhat this year, and I was intimately involved in that because there were some issues for exceedances of some of the flow requirements or failure to meet them, and I basically told Reclamation that my enforcement discretion on some of those issues would be tempered by how much they stepped up to the plate and dealt with the pulse flow issue this year, even though it was a dry period. And I believe they did step up at their petition, and the pulse flows that were provided was about 80% of what the underlying order provided, which 80% of meeting the requirement in this dry year is pretty good, and it helped get fish down the San Joaquin River before it got too warm. It dramatically improved salinity conditions in the southern delta, and also allowed some export of additional water. The only downside, obviously, was New Melones was, the storage was reduced quite a bit to accomplish these things. The other compliance activity I want to talk about is South Delta salinity. There are provisions in D1641 for the Southern Delta regarding salt and salinity, and it's been kind of an interesting situation with the pulse flows. Every compliance monitoring station, Vernalis and 3 of the 4 in the interior delta, just dramatically improved. But we have this one vexing compliance station. It's called the Tracy Bridge station. It's routinely exceeded. The board had a cease and desist order in effect for many years, which requires feasible and reasonable things to be done to try to address that situation. And I just want to call to your attention, I had a meeting with South Delta Water Agency and the Department of Water Resources and other representatives just last week on May 15th, and for the first time we really started talking about potential fixes to this vexing area where you have this kind of scrambled egg situations of meandering sloughs, not much dilution, very slow moving current, and we've talked about a lot of potential fixes, and I was really happy to see that we're moving beyond talking more about generalities and talking about something that actually could have the potential to fix the the salinity situation in that particular area. whoops. The last topic I want to bring up is kind of an interesting one. I thought about what to present to you. I know Fran and Tam remember this very well when I interviewed for the Delta Water Master position, almost 4 years ago, that we talked about this one little provision in the water code about the water master's obligation to provide regular reports to the board and to the stewardship council on various water issues. And we concluded at the end of the interview that this could be the kind of the sleeper provision in all of the authority dealing with the Office of Delta Water Master. And I just wanted to take just a couple minutes to kind of test that theory out by looking at some of these reports. And the first one, as you might recall, was a bit controversial right out of the chute, where I issued a report dealing with the unreasonable use doctrine and the possible application for efficiency practices. And I think a lot of people translated that into Wilson was saying that the farmers are wasting water, and that's not what I said. And I think I started out from exactly the opposite premise, that most people, farming interests in California use water very efficiently, lead the nation and in fact the world in many of these practices, but because so much of the consumptive use of water is in the agricultural area, if you could find pockets where there aren't some of those practices being adopted and you can migrate some of those practices, it could potentially save some water. And since that time, that kind of idea has been talked about by the National Academy of Sciences, the Stewardship Council's Delta Plan, BDCP policy document, and quite recently there was a poll conducted in California where agricultural water efficiency was brought up as one of the potential items for saving water in a dry situation. The other aspect of that initial report is that I indicated that the waste and unreasonable use constitutional doctrine has gotten a lot of court support, a lot of very broad power authorities, but it has been used pretty much in a reactionary fashion, where litigation between private parties. And I was suggesting in this report that the doctrine could be used more proactively in situations. And I think your item later today on the three tributaries, is kind of an example of the possible use of the waste and unreasonable use authority in a more proactive type manner. One of the other reports that I provided was on the water rights enforcement area, and making kind of the comparison between water quality and water rights and showing the deficiency. And it was glad to see that the drought emergency legislation that was adopted this spring did have some provisions to strengthen the board's water rights authority. So that was good to see. And then the report I did on Term 91, with the kind of idea that a Term 91-like principle could be extended to more broad ranging purposes, and just these people that are junior in priority to the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. And that obviously that's one of the options that you guys are going to be talking about tomorrow during the workshop. And then the last one I'll just bring up very briefly. It was the latest report that I did. It was on area of origin. It kind of went through some of the more recent court cases and distilled some of the principles. And I think it's important to visit those and be cognizant of those as we're in one of these dry periods, because obviously the area of origin concepts deal a lot with the priority of water use, and priorities are a big deal in times of water shortage. I hope to be able to spin out at least one more of these reports this summer, but as all of us we're so dependent on working on these important drought issues, I hope I can do it, but we'll see. So with that, I will conclude unless you have any questions.
When would we expect to see some actions on the salinity issue around Tracy Bridge?
Well, it's interesting. We talked about 2 or 3 different concepts. We talked about possibly, pumping water out of the upper reaches of the agricultural drains that are right above where that one compliance point is, and putting it into portions of the system that have more dilution and more flow. We also talked about possibly dredging to deepen the channel, increasing the circulation of the old river right as it meets this compliance point, where basically one of the biggest problems, you have 2 fairly large agricultural drains discharging into Old River just upstream of this compliance point. Another issue is that it would be fairly simple engineering feat to actually reroute these agricultural drains to a portion of the system that provides more dilution. So we're talking about some actual, physically available things. I don't think we're talking about this year, unfortunately, but we're at least talking, and we're going beyond just generalities and talking about specific fixes, which I'm really glad to see.
Great. Craig, thank you for your hard work, and these reports have been great. So I'll be curious to see what you come up with next.
Thank you.
Thanks. Really valuable. Mr. Howard, Executive Director's Report. I'm sort of hoping, unless people have burning questions given the length of our agenda, that we could not discuss it, as we usually don't discuss it, and then just follow up with you, unless there's something.
That would be my intent.
Okay. It's great, thank you. It's not, just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean it's not valuable. In fact, it probably saves time in questions that we might be asking you either here or individually. So, okay. Item number 9. All right, let's see if you really earned those awards. It's sort of perilous to do that. I know for scheduling purposes we frequently do that, but it is a little bit awkward.
All right. Where was this? Okay. Good morning, Chair Marcus, board members. Hi, my name is Bill Harrith. I'm a water resource control engineer in the municipal stormwater unit, and thank you for the opportunity to present this item for you today. The adoption of the amendment to incorporate TMDL implementation requirements into the NPDES statewide stormwater permit for the Department of Transportation. This is a culmination of the efforts by staff and stakeholders that were prescribed when the board adopted the permit on September 19, 2012. I will be presenting today the changes that are proposed to the public draft that was released on February 11th and the board heard testimony on at the workshop on March 18th. 9 comment letters were submitted containing 63 comments. Additionally, we met with the department on several occasions to clarify issues, and we also met with the environmental stakeholders on April 9th to clarify the intent of their comments. The main topics of the comments were compliance units, prioritization of surface water reaches, monitoring, and best management practice implementation requirements. In addition, several factual errors were corrected relating mainly to individual details of the TMDLs. Some of the more prominent changes to the public draft are listed here. They include removing the optional water effects ratio language from the metals categorical requirements. We added language to the TMDL status review report, which is an annual report, and the TMDL progress report, which is an end of the permit term report, to require the use of analytical tools when determining adequacy of implementation efforts. Staff also specified in Section 2A that design pollution prevention BMPs, numeric sizing criteria, and specific BMP implementation requirements of the adopted order apply to BMPs installed to meet the requirements of Attachment 4. Staff agreed with NGO comments that more emphasis should be placed on TMDL deadlines when developing the prioritization list. We have added some language to indicate that once credit is issued for a particular area, there would not be any other credits given for that same area. For example, if a retrofit project is not performing as designed or requires upgrading in the future to meet standards, no additional credit would be claimed for that upgrade. Also, in order to avoid confusion with similar requirements for ASBS, We revised language so that the defined terms of direct discharge and indirect discharge did not appear in the qualitative factors for the REACH prioritization. We also removed the TMDL for Los Penasquitos Lagoon from Attachment 4, since the TMDL has not, as of the time of this hearing, been approved of by OAL or US EPA. So this brings the total number of TMDLs in Attachment 4 down to 84. In response to a request by the department, staff has included an option for the creation and implementation of a grant program administered by the State Board to address TMDL issues in the same watersheds that the department would have responsibility in. So let's discuss that last bullet for a second, and let's go over some of the advantages that this might grant. It would allow for retrofit projects off of the right-of-way at locations that may otherwise have space, access, or safety limitations within the right-of-way. The grant would allow for the involvement of local watershed partners who have an interest and expertise in the best way to protect, manage, and enhance water quality in the watershed. It would allow for the implementation of BMPs and other creative solutions not typically available to the department. It would allow for larger watershed scale projects, and it would leverage resources from other entities. The grant program would be administered by the State Water Board's Department of Financial Assistance. They would only be available to other responsible parties named in TMDLs and for projects that address the same pollutants of the TMDL that the department would be named as a responsible party. Grants would not be available for non-governmental organizations because of concerns over long-term maintenance and operation of those best management practices. We propose that the department receive compliance unit credit for funds transferred to the program. The department would receive 1 compliance unit for each $88,000 transferred to the fund, the same as for cooperative agreements. The grant program would fund capital projects in watersheds where the department is named as a responsible party in the TMDL. And we propose that a commitment by the grantees to the long-term maintenance and operation of BMPs be a condition of accepting the grant funds. We would require the department to track and report on the status of the implementation efforts. The department would be able to extract this data from our FAST system. And lastly, to help meet the final TMDL deadlines, grant applications would be weighted to award funds to projects that have closer TMDL deadlines. Here is the staff contact information of the Municipal Stormwater Unit. We will gladly answer any questions you may have at this time, and thank you very much for listening.
Questions?
Just a quick question. So I understand on the timing of the Los Penasquitos TMDL, but that was something we recently approved, and now it's going through. So what do you predict will happen if it gets through and it's approved by US EPA? Is it going to be applicable to this permit?
Let me jump in and say that we have TMDLs that are being adopted all the time, and it is the responsibility of the responsible parties to implement those TMDLs, but the enforceable requirements only come when they've been adopted into a permit. And so this will get pulled in the next time we re-adopt this permit. So like the ones that are being pulled in now that have been adopted over the last 10 years, this will be pulled in the future.
That makes sense. I just think of the logistics, you know, the pace of that TMDL. If there are certain items they want to get going in a cooperative framework that is being suggested here within that 5-year time frame, you know, is that an impediment they're going to run into, or you know, or Caltrans and other stakeholders going to be able to take advantage of these mechanisms?
That's really hard to say. They're going to have their hands full with the 84 TMDLs that they have, and meeting the requirements for those. This wouldn't be an impediment for them to work early on a TMDL, but I wouldn't count on that.
No, I get that. Okay, thanks for the discussion.
I know BMPs are going to vary by constituent to a certain extent, but to a great extent, BMPs for many of these TMDLs are going to accomplish things for other future TMDLs because of the good housekeeping nature of the response in this context, right?
Right, and we also use that as part of the priority scheme. If there's a listed water that they can take care of multiple problems at the same time, that gets a higher priority in their scheme.
Other questions before we go to comments? Okay. First, Mr. Scott McGowan, Chief Environmental Engineer for Caltrans. Thank you, Mr. McGowan, and thanks for both of you waiting patiently. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is this on? Thank you, Chair Marcus, Vice Chair Spivey Weber, and board members. My name's Scott McGowan with the California Department of Transportation, as you know, as Caltrans. When I took this position about 7 years ago, I thought, well, after about 5 years, we'll have all these TMDLs figured out and everything running smoothly. Well, 7 years later, well, we had about 40 back then. So now we're up to 85, but I think we've made a lot of progress. I think that, as Board Member Moore mentioned earlier, that I think the public expects us to work together as government agencies. But one of the hardest things for me in working in stormwater is to explain to my family and friends what I do for a living. And I just want to give you a short anecdote story that I visited my grandfather a few weekends ago, and he lives by himself out in a rural area, and I feel kind of bad for him out there, but he has this big German Shepherd that protects him, so I felt good. So I was making dinner for him, and I grabbed the dishes, and they were really dirty. And I said, Grandpa, are these dishes clean? And he said, they're as clean as stormwater could get them. And I thought to myself, he's learning. Maybe he's reusing his water, reharvest. And so we went on, we finished dinner, and in the morning we made breakfast. And I said, Grandpa, are these dishes clean? They look kind of slimy and dirty. He says, they're as clean as stormwater could get them. So I said, okay, I'll just live with that. So I was leaving, and I went to hug him, and his German Shepherd jumped up, and he said, down, stormwater, down. Just thought I'd liven it up. You know, stormwater's not very live. Anyway, again, I'll reiterate that we believe that this approach is a better way of regulating a statewide permit such as Caltrans, and it represents a forward-looking scheme. You know, I've been talking about for a long time, there's two things that we have to deal with as dischargers, and that's targeting peak flow and volume, and then looking at trace pollutants or waste load allocation reductions. And I think this is a good way to try to tackle everything holistically. It's not going to work all the time, but when we have that opportunity, I think it's very important. We do also appreciate the addition of the voluntary grant program to the compliance scheme. I think that that will help us address the TMDLs when there's limited opportunities, as Bill was talking about. I do have one concern, however, about the 2 trash TMDLs that were not part of this scheme. And not that we don't want to do them, it's very important that we address the trash in Ballona Creek and LA River. It's just I'm kind of concerned with the time schedule orders of those, as we've been trying to do this over the last 2 years, a paradigm shift in how we're going to look at this statewide scheme. And that's all I have.
So this just came to my attention, but I'm going to work with Caltrans and Region 4 to get together with them and figure out what we need to do to address the concerns of the time schedule and getting fitting that into our scheme. And we will come back to you if we need to have any kind of a time schedule order or such to allow them to come into compliance, given the short time frame for those TMDLs.
And just refresh my memory, I'm assuming that we had this discussion this morning about conservation, but largely around rates. But conservation BMPs, conservation, watering the sides of the freeways, the slopes of the freeways, is another area that I'm assuming is going to get covered by some of the BMPs in the TMDLs. Is that correct, or?
Well, it's actually part of the basic permit that you adopted a year ago
Okay.
on reducing, essentially eliminating over irrigation runoff,
Right.
and so
Exactly.
that's already in the permit.
Okay, thank you. I had forgotten. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Mr. McGowan, thanks for your leadership working on Caltrans and working with our staff. I acknowledge that this is a forward-thinking paradigm shift that you all have undertaken, and I really want to throw a lot of support behind. One thing as a civil engineer, and I think in terms of infrastructure renewal and that you're doing constantly, obviously we're focused on TMDL implementation, and like Mr. Bishop says, we've got our hands full with 85. But could you speak to the concern that some of it voiced that, you know, if Caltrans is only going to focus on TMDL and impaired water bodies, they could potentially miss out on opportunities to improve water quality by BMP implementation and their project delivery in areas that are not impaired? And do you see some synergy with the TMDL implementation, you know, learn to use the tools for BMP implementation as part of design as actually helping other water bodies that may have impairments but no TMDLs, or otherwise, you know, have an opportunity to prevent pollution just holistically? Could you speak to that?
Definitely. I think that this new scheme that we're working out here, it actually forces the department to start looking at every project, what we do on every project. So I agree with you. I think that it will make us look at opportunities no matter where we are. That's really important to us, and it's kind of a shift of the way we do business. We're not looking at standalone retrofits and then look at post-treatment 100% of new impervious only on new projects. We're going to be looking at what we can do to maximize credit on anything we're building anywhere.
I really see that opportunity. I think it's a profound shift, and I just really appreciate your working on this and look forward to its implementation, and also as a guiding light for our local transportation agencies around the state. I think we're going to learn a lot, and I look forward to seeing some technical presentations down the road. Thanks.
Thank you.
Others? Thank you very much. Next, Sean Bothwell, Staff Attorney for California Coastkeeper Alliance. Are you here for Heal the Bay too, as in the comments, or just Coastkeeper?
Let's say it. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus, board members. My name is Sean Bothwell. I'm the Staff Attorney for the California Coastkeeper Alliance. I'm also here today representing on behalf of Heal the Bay. I just wanted to start out with just sincerely thanking staff for their commitment to working with us. You know, immediately after that last workshop, they contacted us. They set up a meeting. They spent more than they should have. I gave them like 100 different hypothetical situations just so I could better understand, because it's a very, very large TMDL program.
Yes.
And just that alone helped me be more comfortable with the program itself, and answered a lot of questions that I might not have fully assessed before. But also,
do you want me to suggest that he also meet with you on those 2 TMDLs? On the trash TMDL issue that he's going to be meeting with Region 4 on? That just came up?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I was going to suggest that, but since you're so appreciative, I know he'll do it anyway. No.
We're going to limit it to 25 hypotheticals.
Okay.
But they also listened to some of our recommendations, and you saw them highlighted in the changes that were made. Specifically, the things that were important to us was that the TMDL compliance schedules be a primary consideration when we're doing the implementation schedules. The annual status reports also require analytical tools be used, monitoring be put into the report if that's available. And also, I don't know if I saw this in the staff report, but there's a progress report now in there for when they renew their permit. They need to assess this BMP program and determine whether it's actually working to meet the waste load allocations. And so that gets to kind of my bottom line that I brought up last time, but I wanted to reiterate here, because I think it's important that for us, at the end of the day, at the end of this compliance program, we need to see that Caltrans is actually meeting the waste load allocations in the TMDLs themselves, not this BMP compliance program, because the TMDL waste load allocations are what's important so that impaired waterways are no longer impaired. And so I wanted to just flag in the change sheet some of the changes that were made that specifically just highlight that regardless of this BMP program, that Caltrans needs to independently prove that they've met those waste load allocations to relieve their responsibility under the TMDLs. And so under the change sheet on page 2 at the top, page 24 of the fact sheet, we think this is really important to just put everyone on notice that there are 2 separate issues going on there. And then on page 3 of the change sheet, which is page 160 of the fact sheet itself, it requires in the status report that they assess if they're actually complying with the waste load allocations, if they're actually meeting them, and where there's data available to show that, to prove that they're actually in compliance with the TMDLs. And then finally, in that progress report on page 163, It's just a small change that if there is monitoring available, that they've done that through the monitoring program, that be used when they analyze whether they're actually going to meet their waste load allocations at the end of the day. So those three changes I would request that you incorporate into the permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the time you've spent as well. Oh, Peter Kozelka, US EPA Region 9.
Morning, Madam Chair, board members. Peter Kozelka from the NPDS Permits Office and formerly from the TMDL office. So I'm kind of carrying over some skills in the past. And speaking on behalf of the Water Division, happy to be here. Primary message is that we support the amendment. Know that your staff have been working on this for a long time, not only getting the permit itself renewed, but also the specifics about the TMDL implementation program. And I want to acknowledge that Caltrans has also been open-minded in their efforts to support this cooperative implementation agreement or grant program, and that's an idea that we also support. It is one area where we have a suggestion that I wanted to explain to you and for you to consider. It's related to how we talk to other folks in the TMDL program as well as in the permits, and essentially it comes down to the idea of an offset. So the grant program, as I understand it, says that a grantee, under direction from the state board staff, because Caltrans has made this memorandum of agreement to allow that to occur, the grantee can work outside of the right-of-way, whereas typically Caltrans is going to do their work inside the right-of-way. And all that we're asking is that that effort of a pollutant load reduction in order to get to those waste load allocations be on a greater than 1-to-1 ratio, greater than 1 outside than 1 inside. This is, again, something that we talk about with other folks in other areas of TMDL implementation. How are you going to meet your waste load allocations? If you're a groundwater pumper and you're going to try and reduce selenium by doing something in a non-point source area, we would ask them to do that in a greater than 1-to-1 than within their own groundwater pumping type maneuvering. So it's kind of a concept. I actually have a sentence that I've shared with Bill Harith as to how to fit it into the permit fact sheet. But what I wanted to bring it up conceptually so that Caltrans is aware of what's going on. And with that, I think that's all that I have in terms of the specific comments as a modification. So appreciate your time to have the chance to opportunity to comment, and thanks very much.
Yeah, I would too.
So,
oh, you, yes. You could answer that.
so
We talked about that before. It seems a little late.
well, I understand the concept.
Yeah, sure.
The issue that I find with it is that we're not doing a direct offset program
Right.
here. We're not saying that that we're doing a 1-to-1 or a certain reduction per one of these projects. They're using these projects along with the permittees for the city or municipality or the county, whoever it is, jointly to address a project. So we're
Right. It's
we're
different.
not taking it off and doing a different offset. So I have trouble figuring out how to account for a more than 1-to-1, because it's not we're not giving them a direct waste load allocation reduction where we could say do 1.5 of that waste load allocation for this project. But the general concept, I think, is already embedded, since what we're proposing is that the joint projects have to be sufficient to address the waste load allocation of the municipality and the waste load allocation of Caltrans to account for credits for both. And so
Right.
I'm open to the ideas as we're evaluating the success of this program or the lack of success, or what changes we need to do to maybe more quantify that offset approach. I haven't seen the sentence or the language, and I would turn to staff to see what that has to say. But
Right. And isn't part of the thinking, I mean, this is maybe I'm more projecting my own thoughts. This is sort of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts through encouraging the cooperation
That's
of all
right.
the parties in a watershed. And so the value is you want it to reduce the same amount, but the belief is that it will actually yield more activity and more total reduction because of that cooperative behavior.
Right. That's
What we're trying to
concept
incent.
that we're trying to do.
Right. We're not letting someone get out of something. We're trying to incent something.
Right.
Right. Okay.
But I would add, I do think that it should be explicitly evaluated as we move through this permit period,
Yeah, that's fair.
so that we can more, and Caltrans too, can more accurately speak to the advantage of this grant program and what it actually can deliver. Does it deliver more? Does it deliver less? Does it deliver more than 1-to-1? And so that would be a very strong recommendation of mine.
Excellent point.
Yeah, that does fit right into the stormwater strategic work plan concept, the Caltrans role within that greater framework that we're working on now. And I think that's a very good thing to look at, because we'll come back to some of the language, that we have in our recent phase 2 permit, in 2013, where we weren't tightening it down to certain ratios and that sort of thing, but we were strongly from the board encouraging multi-benefit project investments. And so through the implementation of strategic work plan, we're going to be looking at these investments. We're going to look at the different parties that have come together and what kind of multi-benefits we've achieved. So it can be specific TMDL pollutant reductions. It can be suites of TMDLs within a certain watershed, and it can be other benefits in terms of water supply, groundwater recharge, et cetera. So, I just want to, support Fran's point and redouble this commitment within our strategic work planning to really look at the information we get from these annual reports and the 4 different statewide permits and inform, the next round and really target our staff efforts to be more productive with working with locals, working with Caltrans. Thanks.
Anything else you'd like to add? Any of you?
Did you have language that you were going to propose as another change, or?
No, we weren't actually going to propose additional changes, but I did want to make it clear, just if the board's ready to entertain a motion, that there are essentially 3 sets of amendments that are before the board. There's the set that was sent out on February 11th, and that was the initial set of amendments that was discussed at the March 18th board hearing. After that hearing and after receiving the written comments, staff sent out a second additional set of changes on May 14th. And then a third and final set of late changes went out late last night and this morning. So they're all cumulative. So we have essentially 3 sets of amendments before the board.
Do you need motions separately, or can someone move all 3 sets?
One motion for all 3 would be fine.
All right. And do we need any language to direct some of the assessment that
I don't
our
think it's
colleagues-
necessary.
I think it's implicit in what you've said. So
Sure.
okay. So
Yes, it's
you're
included.
good. That's your intent, because that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, we were already going to be doing that kind of assessment.
Okay. Well, in that case, do I have any further questions, or do I have a motion of any kind?
Could I, well, if there's no other further discussion, I'd certainly like to move the staff recommendation with the 3 different components for adoption.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all for your good work. You get to keep your awards. And if I could give awards to Caltrans and Sean and others, I would do that as well as the other staff. Thank you, and thank you for the creativity, John in particular, all the hours that you've spent getting us here. So thank you very much.
I can retire happy now.
Well, that is huge. I wish I could say that. That's really good. All right. Thank you all. I am going to hand the chair over to my able vice chair now for the next item, as I have to leave to do something for a little while over the lunch hour that was scheduled well before we knew what an august calendar we would have today. So you're in good hands.
Well, this could be a very brief item. We have one card, and it is in support and to appear if necessary. So we could do potentially without the staff presentation and have the board go ahead and consider adoption, or we can do the staff presentation.
Let me unofficially or officially look to my colleagues. Would you like to have a staff presentation?
I move the item for adoption.
The only thing I would ask is we're relying on a card that was submitted. You may want to check to make sure Mr. I believe it was Blankenship, really is only a support if necessary and that he doesn't want to speak on the item.
Mr. Blankenship?
I move the item.
All in favor?
Aye. Great job,
I think
staff.
I think we did it. We will reconvene at 1 o'clock, at which time we will take up item 12. Oh, we still have no, we just did. Yeah.
No. The Millview item is the next item that would be up on
I'm
the
sorry.
agenda.
Yeah.
I do not know what the board's pleasure on this. My recollection is that Ms. Marcus
quite
was
agree.
one of
I'm
the
sorry.
hearing officers for that item. And so the board certainly could take this up at 1 when she is back with us.
She won't be back until 1:30.
Okay.
So I have this will take about half an hour. Is that about right? Is there a way of breaking it up, or would you prefer to come back at 1 o'clock?
Ms. Spivey-Weber, I'm Alan Lilly for Sonoma County Water Agency. I'm just one of the participants. Our preference is to go forward now.
Okay.
But it obviously depends on how the board wants to
We've
proceed.
got 10 minutes. Let's do it. Go.
Do we have staff here?
Do we
for
have
this item?
staff? Yes. I know we have the attorney. Oh, he's not.
No. We'll get the staff down as quickly as we can.
Ernie went to lunch.
Staff counsel is here.
No.
Oh, you're the
this is from
prosecuting
team.
counsel. That's correct.
I just conferred with Mr. Lilly, and he's available to come back at 1:30. I'm available at 1:30.
Well, no, actually, we would like to come back at 1.
At 1.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, whatever your preference is.
Yes.
But we're available after lunch.
Okay, so we will.
Any other parties available? I want to make sure. Okay.
Okay, so let's reconvene at 1 o'clock. We will adjourn. Oh, here comes Ernie. Can you do your how long will your presentation take?
Very short.
Okay. Let's go ahead.
Good morning, board members. I am Ernie Mona, and we would have had Samantha Olson, the board's office chief counsel, and Michael Buckland sit here, but I think they're not here yet. Okay, item 11 being considered today is a draft order revoking water right license 5763. As described in the draft order, license 5763 was issued to Masonite Corporation in 1959, and in 2007, ownership title was transferred to Melview County Water District. In 2008, the Division of Water Rights issued a notice of proposed revocation for license 5763, alleging that the licensee failed to observe the terms and conditions of the license, has not or ceased to put water granted under the license to a useful or beneficial purpose for at least 5 or more consecutive years, and that the license should be revoked. Melview requested a hearing on the proposed revocation, and the hearing was held on April 2nd, 2013. The draft order being considered for adoption finds that revocation of license 5763 for non-use of 5 consecutive years or more is supported by the facts and evidence in the record and is appropriate. The draft order was released for public comment on April 22nd, 2014. with instructions that comments should be limited to the general acceptability of the draft order or possible technical corrections. The board received 8 comment letters by the May 9th noon deadline. One additional comment letter was received after the deadline, and that late submitted letter was not distributed to the board members or entered into the record. The submitted comment letters can be grouped into 2 general categories: those supporting the draft order and those opposed to the draft order. The first group of letters include comments submitted by Sonoma County Water Agency and the Division of Water Rights prosecution team. These parties support the adoption of the draft order. Sonoma County requested that 2 minor technical corrections be made to the draft order. We reviewed those suggested corrections, and staff agrees with adding the first proposed edit, which adds an additional sentence to footnote number 7 of the draft order, addressing hearsay objections to an exhibit. However, we believe that the second proposed edit is unnecessary. The second group of letters include comments submitted by Melview County Water District, Redwood Valley County Water District, Capella County Water District, Hopland Public Utility District, and Willow County Water District, and 3 additional letters submitted by the general public. The comment letter submitted by Bellevue County Water District opposes the adoption of the draft order. Melview's comment letter renews its request made during the hearing that the board should exercise its discretion in this matter and only partially revoke license 5763 by limiting the annual use of water under the license to no more than 1,314 acre-feet per annum. As described in the draft order, this quantity of water represents the last reported use of water made under the license in 1999 by Masonite Corporation. It is staff's opinion that the arguments presented in Melview's comment letter do not raise any issues that merit any corrections or changes to the draft order. The comment letter submitted by Redwood Valley County Water District and jointly by Capella County Water District, Hopland Public Utility District, and Willow County Water District urge the board to exercise its discretion to preserve the license. Finally, the general public comment letters also urge the board to exercise its discretion to preserve the license. In closing, staff recommends that the board adopt the draft order revoking license 5763 with the one change described by the change sheet that was circulated on May 16th and which was electronic provided to the service list of parties for this matter. As described by the change sheet, which was circulated to the board and provided to the general public, the one recommended change is located on page 10 of the order. It's a change to footnote number 7 to include an additional last sentence which states, while the report is hearsay, it is properly admitted to supplement or explain other evidence admitted during the hearing related to water use at the former Masonite plant, and it cites the government code section. Thank you for consideration, and that concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions from board members? Thank you for coming in. I think we will, however, not continue. Do you think so? I've got 4 cards. 2 are in support and 2 are opposed. And they, it's 25 minutes altogether estimated on the cards. Yeah. So I think we're going to have to come back at 1 o'clock, and we will hear those that are in support and those that are opposed. So until then, we're adjourned. Thank you.